Welcome to our podcast. Your next big project is you. And this is our version of a top 10 hit parade. I've been privileged to interview a number of folks, leaders, managers, coaches, to really rewind their lives and their careers to talk about their journeys to success. So when you think about this and listening to some of these clips that we're sharing with you around living a life of significance, around living a life with no regrets, around living a life with abundance, with gratitude, with the quest to be your best, having perspective in your life, and ultimately to live your legacy, not just to leave it, but to live it right now. Enjoy this as you're thinking about the next 5 to 25 years of your life at some point as well. See you in our next podcast. I know you wrote a book a few years ago around a compilation of outside insights and essays on capitalism, on conscience, on community. Not many people do things like that, Pat. So tell us more about that project.
Well, it got started when the local newspaper asked me to first join the editorial board, which I did. And then I was on there for a couple of years, and they said, would you be interested in writing a weekly column, a Sunday column for the paper? And at first I was a little apprehensive because I hadn't published stuff like that before, that was going to be read by, each week about three or 400,000 people. Right. So I did it, and then I got into it, and I stayed at it for 4 years. And I asked him, I said, I can't write on business because that's too boring to me. There's a lot more stimulating things out there to talk about. And sometimes I wrote on business, but I said, I'm going to kind of wander around, and they let me do just that. They let me write about just about anything that I wanted to write. Obviously I didn't write about politics, and I don't write in an offensive way. But I had a lot of thoughts that I wanted to get out. And after I'd done that, what actually stimulated me more than anything else, Leo, is there was a little pamphlet I did when my son graduated from Fordham. And I think you have a copy. You maybe have a copy. Yeah.
Will do.
And I wrote in my newspaper column, if anybody wants a copy of this, and it's just a little affirmations to get you going in business, things you have to learn, things that you got to kind of train your brain. Right. And when I wrote it up in the newspaper, and I said, if anybody wants one of these, just send me an email and I'll send it out to you for free. I wasn't doing it to make money. And I think in a 2-week time, maybe 3 weeks, I got like 3,000 emails. That's when I started to realize there's a lot of people out there that are looking for some direction, or their grandkids are, or their kids are. And this little simple pamphlet could do that. There's probably more that I should be doing to provide that. Yeah. That's all I got in the book. That's all I said, I should publish this, and I should, kind of memorialize some of my thoughts, not only for my own son, but just that would help other people. And it turned out to be quite successful. Yeah.
How do you come up with the ideas, Pat? I mean, that you're on a time clock in terms of editorial content, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I know you did this for almost 5 years, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Just
correct.
that one stint with the local Democrat and Chronicle in your backyard in Rochester there and things. What was the impetus for coming up with different ideas to stimulate people? Was it the walking up the grocery aisle? Hey, Pat, I enjoyed that. Was it, at the country club? Was it, hey, I read your article, you should write about this? Tell us more about how your ideas come about.
Kind of all the above what you just said. That all happens, right? And but you walk into Wegmans, and there's a mother there, a single mother with her son, and she says, Mr. Burke, will you tell my son, kind of give him some guidance? Of course, I'm there just to pick up eggs and milk, right?
Exactly.
And I said, what? I said, I'm certainly not qualified to do that. And she goes, oh, yes, you are. I don't have a husband, this and that. And I said, you're the most powerful person in this boy's life. I'll tell him a story. And I told him a story about John Wooden and, how he would treat his players when he came in. And of course, the young man, I asked him if he knew Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Yes, of course he did. And I asked him if he knew John Wooden. Of course he didn't. And, basically said, your mother's your John Wooden, right? She's going to train you to become the best you can be. So that kind of thing would happen. Or I'd read something that I thought was interesting, that I thought others might think it's interesting. it really wandered, it kind of wandered all over the place. But there was always, if keep your eyes open, there's always things to see.
When you're making decisions around charitable causes, how do you go about that process of who to assist? And I see that because I'm sure your clients have got those issues of which areas touch their heart the most. And it reflects in terms of your own value system, because I know you're extremely philanthropic. What goes through your head there in terms of your clients as well as Jim Gould?
Yeah, I think maybe the first thing I'd say, Leo, is that I think that I was raised by parents who really focused, taught their four children to be mindful of others' needs and to help in any way that we can. And so as part of how I was brought up, you and I both went to St. Bonaventure University, where the focus of the Franciscan philosophy of the school is service to others and help to others. So I think that there's not like a lot of thought that goes into wanting to give. That's sort of the way you are, and the way I like to think that I am. So in terms of how do we distribute the money and how does that happen? Some of it is tied certainly to our client base. We have over 110 not-for-profit clients, and so we certainly try to support them with their fundraising efforts. Almost all of those have some kind of fundraising, and so we do that both at the firm level, and my wife Ann and I do that. Support many of them personally as well. Above and beyond that is there's critical needs in the community, and when they there are always critical needs, but sometimes there's some that are even more profound and immediate, and we need to respond to that. The community does, and we try to do that both at the firm level and personally. And then there are organizations. I've recently joined a board about a year and a half ago called ROC 2025, ROC. That's for Rochester, and trying to accomplish some economic advances for our community that will help those who need the help the most. And I think we're going about it in a very intelligent way. It's led by some, very significant leaders in our community. I'm delighted to be part of that group, and that makes me feel good. I think because we're teaching people how to fish rather than just giving them the fish, which is really critical for long-term success in turning our helping people who are economically disadvantaged at this point.
Yeah, teaching people how to fish, Jim. That concept is one, as you know, that's in our sabbatical experience. We talk about the concept of abundance. And abundance to me is all around intentional stewardship. You mentioned 100 plus not-for-profits that you are obviously, whether it's your time, or whether it's your talent, whether it's your treasure. It's not always money.
Right.
Correct me on that, right? I mean, sometimes it's just the time required for mentorship, helping other organizations, might be part of their business strategy. They're planning what they need to do to raise funds. Does that resonate with you beyond the treasure of just opening up your wallet, but in terms of time and talent as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I have gotten involved with clients and non-clients, and in a variety of different ways. I've, like you, Lee, I've sat on many different boards, not-for-profit boards, and not that I think I have some extraordinary talent or anything like that, but the few little things I do know something about, I'm happy to try to help those organizations. And that does go beyond just the investment world. I have been involved in a lot of fundraising efforts, both from a strategic planning standpoint as well as implementation. I'm not afraid to ask people for money when I know it's going to a good cause. And I'm also, willing to do the legwork that needs to be done at organizations. That, when I say legwork, I mean that both literally and figuratively. Been involved just in the last few years, doing things at not-for-profits, from literally going out there and cleaning out old warehouses and moving things around, and you do that type of thing, as well as try to be involved at an intellectual level and provide again the limited talents that I do have, provide those to those organizations. And then, but the treasure part is important too. And, we've been blessed. We try to support organizations as best we can, as I mentioned, both at the firm level as well as personally.
Yeah. I
But
don't know if I have,
go ahead.
yeah, go. Did you have follow up?
Well, I'm just going to say, I love, the word abundance is a beautiful word because when I hear the word abundance, I don't think of a pile of money.
Right.
That's not what pops in my head. Abundance comes in the most important levels. Parts of abundance are intangible or non-financial, which you had alluded to earlier, and that allows us, when we have those blessings and we're in that type of a position, that allows us to do more and to provide more to others. And there's nothing, for me at least, there's nothing more gratifying than being able to help other people.
Is there a trip in particular with 40 plus cruises that you've been on? Is there something when you think back, this is Leo, this one I went on, maybe top some of the other ones, or is in the top three? What that might be?
Well, there is one area of the world. People always say, "What's your favorite cruise? What's your favorite spot?" There's an area of the world that to me it was just fascinating and continues to be one of the most interesting ones. And I have a story connected to that, and that's the Middle East. Going to Israel for the first time and visiting the Middle East, and going to Jordan and Egypt and everything around the Middle East. At the time, one of our favorite people from PBS was Gwen Ifill. And Gwen, was in the New York Times, was at NBC, came to PBS, and she was in charge of Washington Week. And then she joined with Judy Woodruff as the first two female anchors for the PBS NewsHour. And we invited Gwen to come to one of our cruises. I think it was in Alaska. And at the time, she was like, "Oh, I'm very busy. I can't do this, maybe 3 days." She walked on and she's like, "Wait a minute. I think I could stick around for more than this." And she wound up doing 8 cruises with us before she died, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. But there was one cruise with her, which was so interesting. We were debating, like, where would she like to go next? And we had an opportunity to do one of our programs and an itinerary that included Israel. And I told her, I said, "You can't be the anchor of the NewsHour and not have seen this part of the world, because it's so much a part of news for 1,000 different reasons." And so she came with us on this, and she lectured throughout the voyage, and we had a great time with it. But, when you go and you visit the Middle East, and specifically when you go and see Israel, you can't help but be moved by what you experience. And of course, politically, it'd be all over the map in terms of how you feel about the government and how they treat the Palestinians and all that other stuff. But when you see it, it's the size of New Jersey. And yet in terms of influence and impact politically around the world, for lots of good and bad reasons, it's a fascinating place. I mean, I'm raised Catholic. Your catechism comes alive as you go through the Valley of Armageddon and you see this part of the world. But doing it with her was really special, because I think I've done it probably 7 or 8 times now. I've been to Israel, and it just challenges your thinking about politics, about religion, about world affairs, about the Holocaust, and in ways that really surprised me. And I often say to people, go there and have the experience. I know it'll change the way you think. One way or another, it'll change the way you think. And with Gwen, it was a wonderful opportunity to share with her. And, because she had this responsibility as an anchor and, west of it. And 3 weeks later, she calls me and she says she was invited to a salon, kind of a fancy dinner deal, at a gentleman's house who owned a lot of magazines based in Washington. And she was placed seating next to the Israeli ambassador to the United States. And, and be able to talk about these issues, having been there and seen it. She said, it was such a gift. It was such a gift. She never would have had the quality conversations that she had with him if she had not had that experience. And so, that's one example of the opportunity that travel proposes. I mean, when you go to Vietnam and you go to Saigon and you see everything that was there in terms of the war, it can't help but impact your feeling about that and that part of our history. And when you go to Rome and you go to the Vatican and you see it, and just have these these impressions that just make you think differently and hopefully think broader. And
Yeah.
so that part of the world has been most interesting. Sharing with Gwen was really special, one of my favorite memories. But again, there have been so many opportunities to visit different parts of China, early into China before a lot of it changed. Fascinating to see how that's grown now. It's been a real gift.
A balance with everything going on in your life.
I don't. I have, let's see, a coach. I have a peer team. I have business friends that compete with me, that talk with us. We talk with each other. It's the same as you do, right? You have this circle of trust group of people. You
Yep.
have, I always joke, I have an understanding family, right? They know my passions because I lead with passion. So, they understand that it's not maybe just, crazy. And no, I have my moments. Listen, I'm not a complete success. I've had my moments that I can come back to the table to business and say, listen, I've been through that. I've been through the bad hires and the bad off hires, right? I've been through growing too fast and then growing too slow, spending too much on one thing and not spending enough on another. I mean, thank you for flattering me, but I'm perfect not being perfect. I think that's part of it, right?
The issues of likability and trust, how they come into play from your perspective.
Well, I think no matter what business we're in, any business in the world, if you and I are going to do business, you're going to do business with me, you're going to hire me or deal with me, you have to like me, trust me, think my solutions are right. And people start focusing on Aristotle said, if you want to be a charismatic speaker, make your audience happy. He said there were three things. That was number one. So in my profession, financial planning, if someone comes to see a financial advisor, the advisor, he or she is focused on their products, on the process, on the results. The clients are focused on happiness. They just want to be financially happy. So make them happy. So likability, I don't want to wander too much, but Leo, I grew up many, many, many years ago in a small town in New England saying yes, sir, no, ma'am to my parents. It's a different generation. Likability is moving your cart away from the middle of the aisle in the supermarket. It's holding the door for the person behind you. We all do business with people we like. Trust, irrational, nonlinear. A young mother walking down the streets of Buffalo, New York, holding a child is not going to hand that infant just a tire shoe, will not hand that infant to a stranger. She will hand the infant to a fireman because she trusts firemen. You ask her why? I don't know. I just trust firemen. They're trustworthy people. It's nonlinear.
Yeah.
I think clients only have one question: can I trust you? So, Leo, if you and I are doing business and you like me, you think I'm smart, but you don't trust me, you're not going to do business with me.
Yeah, exactly.
If you think I'm smart and you trust me, but you don't like me, you're not going to do business with me.
Yeah.
So I don't care what business you're in, work on your likability. Forget the product knowledge. That's 5% of your success. Work on your likability and your trustworthiness and solutions. And trustworthiness is fragile. It really is fragile.
Yeah. I always tell people, Don, my dictionary here in beautiful Buffalo, because this builds on one of your other themes around confidence. And when you look up the definition of trust, it says total confidence that others have in three things that you possess. They talk about your integrity. They talk about the fact of your character, that fireman, in terms of the dress and the reputation and things like this. They talk about your abilities. So when someone says, "Hey, Don, I trust you," that that deep down, that those three things are usually in place.
Yeah. Just, Leo, when I was a kid 50 years ago, starting in this business, if a client called me, it was acceptable to call back within a week. Today, with text messaging, it's within 5 minutes.
Wow.
So there's all these things, these dynamics that can shatter trust. Yeah. But basically, it's trust. If I can predict what you're going to do, Leo, good or bad, I'll trust you one way or the other.
What are some of the cues or things that you're telling them to be on the watch for? These are things that are early signs that are you have to protect yourself and protect your client. What are some of those takeaways that they write down when you're talking to them right now?
Well, you're looking for any type of behavior that interferes with everyday living. And I'll give you an example. The example I use when I'm speaking is, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands of how many of you have walked into a room and said to yourselves, what about walking in this room for? Because we've all done that. But here's the difference. Walking into a room and forgetting why you walked into that room, that's one thing. Walking into a room and not knowing it's a room or where you are, You see, that is impairment that interferes with everyday living, and that is what needs to be checked. So that's really what you're looking for. And
Wow.
and the early warning signs are going to be, I think everybody needs to understand that everybody that has Alzheimer's or any form of dementia, their disability is going to be short-term memory loss. Where are we going? What are we doing? Over and over again. Just cannot remember. So as advisors, I tell them you'll look for a client that calls in and won't know. So I'm coming in on Tuesday, right? No, Mr. Bowles, you came in last Tuesday. You've already been in. Oh, okay. So you're looking for things like that, and they having trouble understanding what you're saying, and confused about the money. They'll start. Actually, it starts pretty early, even having problems paying bills. That's really what got my mother. My dad called me one morning and said, "You're not going to believe this, son. Your mother called me crying this morning because she couldn't remember how to balance the checkbook. One day it was there, and then it was gone."
Yeah. Amazing.
Right. And
Well-
but what is good about the financial services industry is they have put some new FINRA rules in place that encourage the financial advisors that if they see any memory impairment, anything like that that makes them a little bit concerned, they are encouraged to have contact with somebody else in the family and let them know if they know what's going on.
I mean, Zach, come on, there's only 24 hours in the day. I don't know how you get everything done. As the leader of the law firm, launching this other investment opportunity and things. I love the fact of just your ambition, your passion. You're like an Energizer bunny here in terms of going, and making a difference and responding to opportunities. How you getting all this stuff done?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned over the years is that focus is really important. Making sure you're working on the right thing at the right time. I also, over the years, have worked with, I spent a lot of time on personal development, seminars, coaches. I read a lot of books, and all of that stuff has really helped me improve. What I'm really looking for is a return on time. A return on investment is really important. But for me, I think to be a successful entrepreneur and a successful investor, what that means to me is that I have a very high return on my time. So I think probably my wife might disagree that I'm the Energizer bunny, because I think to her, I'm either taking a nap or reading all the time. And that's pretty much how I like to spend my time, is taking a nap or reading, or just sitting around thinking. And I tend to believe that, I don't have to make a lot of the right decisions. I just have to make a few good decisions a year, and that really carries most of the freight.
I always remember, I'm thinking of changes that we've seen in individuals and organizations, and the life metaphor, if I can call it that, or analogy that you use, was getting up every day and taking a walk out to the ocean and seeing the sunrise and the waves. And it's better that you describe that story, because, as you said, it changes. It's different every day.
What it is, and it's a kind of a metaphor for life, at least from where I sit and the way I think about things. The reason I love sunrises every day is that, and the beach in general, is that every day that I go out there, it's different. It's not the same. The sun comes up, it casts its light differently on the shoreline. The shoreline's different every day. And I think that, as I said, is a metaphor. If you approach life recognizing that every day is a new adventure, that there's a possibility or an opportunity on the horizon, it just helps me, and I think it would help others, to be much more in tune with what they can possibly achieve. And I think that, to me, is really the basis for that. I'll share one quick story that I learned from a gentleman by the name of Scott Shepard. Scott's a dear friend. He is a renowned psychologist and has worked largely in his career helping people overcome the most severe obstacles they could face, from death of a loved one or a child to addiction and on and on and on. And so, Scott's simple approach to this was that we as human beings are willing to give up control at every turn. Whatever adversity comes in front of us, we're willing to pass over control for that adversity and then take that negative feeling and carry it with us. And so the sunrise to me is sort of the antidote to that, which is if you view things as being what's possible as opposed to what's there, it makes it more productive and engaging as you approach these challenges on a day-to-day basis.
You end it with something very near and dear to my heart about happiness as a state of mind.
Yeah.
And I believe in my work as well, because a lot of it now is around significance to legacies, right? And to it's not just think about a legacy, but to live it now and to pursue joy
Beautiful.
in your life right now, today, right? As I'm trying to do, I picture this circle, the things within that circle, Michelle, that
Nice.
bring us joy, and the things outside as we're mapping things that are taking away or diluting us in our efforts to pursue joy. When you talk about happiness as a state of mind, is that connecting in the same way? Is that a kissing cousin to what people would read in your book here?
Absolutely, Leo. I think so. I think, the point really of this particular self-discovery is, we could insert any word for happiness, by the way. The point is that all mental states, positive or negative, are temporary, and they are a state of mind. And if we practice or have the habit of fill in the blank again and again, then that is what we will experience, for better or for worse, right? So if we want it to be happiness, which is one way of being in the world, especially sort of intrinsically happy, then what we need to understand is that we can experience that. And it doesn't mean that we won't experience other mental states, but it does call to attention that we get to decide how much we focus, how much power we give to any mental state. And instead of it being in charge of us, we can actually, there's a metaphor that I think fits this very well. It's, in Eastern cultures, they have water buffaloes. And I spent a fair bit of time in India and Nepal, lived there for a long time. And so they lead the animal around by a nose ring, like in the nose, and a rope attached to it, because it's a very sensitive part of the big animal. And so I like this metaphor for ourselves, which is that if you hand that nose rope over to anybody else outside of you, they can drag you around. But guess what? Your own emotions and thoughts can drag you around. So take back the nose rope. Take back your own nose rope. And then really, you're in charge of what you experience.
I'm curious, what are the mistakes people make? What are the mistakes that you counsel people on? Help us with that perspective, if you would, please.
Well, I think one of the things that people need to recognize, and why working with a very competent financial advisor is so important, is we've helped thousands of people retire successfully, and most people only go through it once. And when was the last time you did something for the first time and did it right? That's really difficult. So what we try to do is really just find out what people's dreams, desires, objectives are, and try to put some kind of a financial price tag on it, if possible, and a time frame. And then do all the behind the scenes calculations of what's needed for that, but not make them have to worry about how do you invest, and all of the issues that complicate investing, which is taxes. So I would tell you the biggest mistake, if I were to say, what's one, is people don't know enough about taxes or take it into consideration when doing planning. And it's amazing if you're don't just always look in the rear view mirror, but project into the future, what you can do to simplify and reduce long-term taxes. And that's been probably the biggest thing. And then I would say that the second biggest thing is people just don't think big enough. And yeah, I would have never said this years and years ago, but the biggest problem we run into is clients don't spend enough, or they don't think the opportunities of what they can accomplish are big enough. And so we spend the vast majority of our time trying to encourage them to do more and to think bigger. And, if anything were possible, what would what would that experience be that you'd like to participate in with you or your family or whatever? Because more than likely it's possible.